Hi there, my name's Misha, and welcome to All Things True Crime, or welcome back if you're a regular. If you enjoy this video, please like it so more people will see it, and then subscribe to my channel so you won't miss my next video. The subscribe button's right below the video, and then if you ding the bell, you'll get notified the next time I upload. That's All Things True Crime. It's truly chilling. Now, let's get right to it. The ending of John Wayne Gacy's terrible story. So the killer clown will go down. If you haven't watched part 1 or 2, consider watching them before this video. And here we go. So Gacy meets his final victim while at a pharmacy discussing remodeling plans with the store owner. Remember, he has a construction business. It's here at this store during this meeting that he targets a 15-year-old boy whom he lures away with promises of a good job, making double what he currently makes as a clerk. When the boy doesn't return home that evening for his mother's birthday celebration, his mom reports it to the police. That seems reasonable. The police go to the store, and the owner gives them Gacy's name as the contractor who was promising this boy a great summer job. He tells them the man who was with the kid is a guy named John Wayne Gacy. Ha, sucker. So when the police run Gacy's background, they see charges on his record that are eerily similar to what could have happened to this boy. Cops go to his house and question him. Sounds very familiar. Gacy is cooperative, of course, but lies through his nose. He says with confidence something like, "Sure, I was at the pharmacy, but I never spoke to the boy." Cops are satisfied with that answer for some reason, and they leave. What? This is where it always ends with Gacy, right? Cops question him, he answers correctly, case closed every time. The difference this time, though, is one man, the newly hired chief of detectives. This guy has a gut feeling that Gacy is somehow involved with this boy's disappearance and vows to solve the case. You're going down, Gacy. So this chief of detectives has his detectives start searching missing persons cases for similar victims. He wants to begin piecing together a case, if possible, and if there is one. And boy, is there. A few detectives head back to Gacy's house to ask him to come down to the station to answer a couple of questions, a few more questions. You know, I think at this point Gacy knows, because this is where the story really deviates from his previous run-ins with the law. The cops have, they've come back before, this has happened, but this time he seems worried. He says over the phone that he has to stay home near the phone as his mom is due to call about his uncle who recently died. The detectives insist that he come with them. Gacy pushes back, and then the detectives say, "You know what, fine, but you better come into the station after your phone call with your mom." So interesting. They're kind of bullying him, right? Because if they truly had any evidence, they would arrest him. So they're trying to get him to cooperate, and when he pushes back, they're trying to be like, "Well, you better come down." I don't blame him. The guy was guilty of sin, but it is a little bit of a bully tactic, and obviously they can't force him because when he pushes back, they have to walk away. Anyway, they're like, "You better come down when your mom calls." Okay. Well, hours later, Gacy calls them and says, "You know what, I'll be there in 30 minutes. 5 hours later, he shows up just covered in mud, head to toe. Why, you might ask? Well, because he had to dispose of the victim's body, which up until moments earlier was being stored in his attic. I thought his bodies, all of these bodies were stored in the crawl space. Well, not this guy. So, it's in the middle of the night at this point, and the detectives, of course, are off duty, obviously. So whomever he talks to at the station sends him away, basically telling him to come back in the morning. Surprisingly, he does show up the next morning around 9 a.m. I'd have probably skipped town, but, I'm not a serial killer. The detectives question him, and he denies everything. No surprise. So, while this is all taking place, the chief of detectives is just waiting for Gacy's background check to return. It finally does, and when he sees the sodomy charges, his stomach drops. He just gets this really nauseating feeling in the pit of his stomach. He takes this information to a judge, who immediately issues a search warrant for Gacy's house. While the officers are outside his house preparing to enter, a neighbor approaches one of the officers just randomly and decides to share with them that the house has both an attic and a crawl space, saying that they are not easy to spot from looking at the house without knowing the floor plan. After obtaining some suspicious and disturbing items during their search, including a pharmacy receipt of the latest victims, they get approval to have 24/7 surveillance placed outside Gacy's home. Sucks for him. They also begin tailing him, following him just everywhere he goes, which is good, right? I appreciate law enforcement. So in an effort to save his reputation in the community, he tells all of his friends and neighbors that he's being harassed by the police and that they're trying to pin something on him that he didn't commit. Whatever, dude. Believe it or not, though, many of them rally around him and offer him support during this time. It's because he was such an upstanding citizen, right? Or appeared to be, with the JCs and a huge network of friends and people that he liked and liked him. Must have been a real schmoozy type dude. So while Gacy's every move is being watched and logged by the police, they also kick off a huge search effort to find this missing kid, Gacy's final victim. They gather and deploy search parties, send out helicopters, all of it. In the meantime, Gacy decides he's going to pull a fast one and files a lawsuit against the police department for what he calls harassment, and he's referring to the police surveillance around the clock. The lawsuit demands that the police stop surveilling him immediately. Now, I'm not sure if Gacy's just dumb enough to think that that's actually going to work, or if he's just being a jerk and trying to just kind of be, obnoxious. The whole thing is just really pissing him off, though. Probably because he's unable to find another victim to rape and murder while being tailed. So he starts messing with the police that are assigned to him by driving to random places just to confuse them, waste their time. He starts taking pictures of them while they're surveilling him, out his window, taking pictures of the car. What an idiot. Doofus. So, all of this is clearly getting to him, right? And he's either taunting them out of arrogance, or he's just beginning to fracture. I tend to think some of both, but mostly the latter. He's fracturing. And here's a few examples. One story goes that in the middle of all of this, he just walks over to the surveillance car. The detectives roll down their window, and he tells them, just straight up tells them, that clowns can get away with murder. What? Another story is that he invites the officers into his house for a sandwich. Another time, he invites the two officers into his house for breakfast. They agree in hopes of finding more incriminating evidence, right? What an idiot to do that. What officer is going to turn that down from a prime suspect? Because now they can investigate without needing a search warrant because he let them in. Well, one of these two officers or detectives asks to use the restroom. While he's in there, the furnace kicks on. It's wintertime, and a huge blast of air shoots up from the crawl space, which, shoots up decomposing flesh smell. Just up through the vent. I guess Gacy forgot that his house stinks like warm, decomposing human flesh, and they say the nose is the first to adjust. Whatever. The unraveling continues. A few days later, he gets drunk in his house and drives to his lawyer's house in the middle of the night and just confesses everything to him. Now, since Gacy's wasted, the lawyer is able to easily sneak outside and tell the detectives that follow Gacy there to not let him leave the parking lot. The lawyer tells them that he is unable to explain to them why due to lawyer-client privilege, but tries to warn them as clearly as he can without breaching the privilege. They say that they have to let Gacy leave because they have no evidence authorizing them to detain him. They just, they can't go off the word of the lawyer, who refuses to tell them anything except don't let him go, so they just continue to follow him. Seemingly at random, he drives to a gas station and sells pot to some random dude. They let that crime slide for now and continue following him in hopes that he will further incriminate himself. Instead, though, he goes home and gives his dog to his neighbor. He loves his dog and wants him to be cared for and loved. It's as though he knows it's over and he's getting his affairs in order. Now, he's murdered 33 boys, but he loves his dog and wants to make sure he's cared for. I'm a huge animal lover, I get it. But, really? He's a psychopath. Why does he care about his dog? He's out murdering dudes. Okay, whatever. Just cook. The next morning, he just goes to sleep. And the next morning, he goes to a friend's house and very cryptically tells him he's done something very bad, some bad things. This friend probes for more, and Gacy says the end is near. The friend continues to probe, and Gacy says the cops are trying to pin a murder on him, and he didn't do it. The friend continues probing, and Gacy just finally walks outside and gets in his car. The friend follows him and says, "Hey, I thought you were here to tell me something." Gacy then turns around, goes back inside, says, "I killed 30 people, give or take a few." His friend asks who they are, and he says, "Bad people that were out to get me." Then he starts crying and leaves. From there, he goes to the house of the two teenagers, Rossi and Cram, who he's paid in the past to dig trenches and spread lime in his crawl space in an effort to aid in the decomposition process, right? And to mask the smell. Didn't do a good job. He tells them he has confessed to his lawyer and a friend the night before, and that this is the last time they will ever see him. Gacy then approaches the officers and asks them if it's okay if Cram drives him to a restaurant. At the restaurant, Cram tells the officers that Gacy wants him to drive him to his father's grave and then to his attorney's office. Cram also tells the surveillance officers that Gacy told him and Rossi about his confessions. The officers think he is about to commit suicide and strongly recommend that Cram leaves the situation before it gets worse. Cram decides to stick around though and help Gacy out. Immediately after Gacy and the boys leave the parking lot, they're pulled over by 3 different law enforcement agencies: local police, county police, and state police. This is because his friend called the police and told him that he had confessed to killing 30 plus people. They arrest him on the pot sale charge back at the gas station there as a means of getting him into an interrogation room. They tell him they're going back to his house to start taking his home apart, looking for his final victim, right? This kid. Since he knows what's buried or who is buried in his crawl space under his house, this makes him super nervous, and it prompts him to quickly admit to killing one person in what he calls self-defense. He tells them the body is buried in his garage and that they don't need to pull up his floors. What an odd thing to say. He offers to take them to the spot and that it can all be over. They agree, but tell him they are still going to investigate his crawl space. The medical examiner is called, woken up out of his bed for this. He starts investigating at around 10 p.m. Everyone thinks they're looking for just the one boy, right? The final victim, the boy from the supermarket. They have no clue what they're about to uncover in that nasty crawl space. The medical examiner brings a team with him, and almost immediately after entering the crawl space, they find human bones. Now, they quickly determine, however, right, that these remains don't belong to the victim that they're looking for because the level of decomposition doesn't match or fit the timeline. The medical examiner also notes the level and strength of the odor, that 1 or even 2 bodies are unable to produce and emit this level of odor. He's positive there are many more bodies buried in the crawl space under Gacy's house. Everyone decides it's best to wait until morning when the lighting is better. They know they have to be extremely thorough in order to make every charge stick. They can't be sloppy, and it's better to excavate during daylight. So back at the precinct, Gacy eventually confesses to killing 30 plus teenage boys. He just lays it all out there for them. He admits to the rape, the torture, the rope trick, the handcuff trick, burying them, dumping them in the river, all of it. The tricks, of course, were just his really disgusting ways to trick his victims into getting into compromising positions, making it easier for him to assault them and kind of manhandle them. The police aren't even sure he's telling the truth because it's such an insane, troubling, stomach-churning story. As this is all unfolding, a tow truck driver comes forward. It says he was called by Gacy to pull Gacy's vehicle out of the mud near the river. Now, this ties him to the bridge at the time when and where he says he dumped the body of his last victim. Shortly after, he is charged with the murder of that last boy. He admits to killing all of them to keep them quiet, so they wouldn't be able to report him to the police, and also that he enjoyed it. He proceeds to draw a map and tell them where every single body is buried on his property. As they investigate his house, they find he has soundproofed his garage. Oh, that's so disturbing. As the medical examiner uncovers more and more bodies, They end up having to call in a forensic anthropologist and odontologist to aid in the investigation and recovery of all of these remains. They are able to recover a lot of blood, hair, teeth, etc. that will aid in identification of all victims. Due to the sheer number of decomposing bodies in such a tight enclosure, the levels of gas being released from the bodies becomes dangerous. The teams have to wear full hazmat suits and will still stumble away from the crawl space, quickly yank off their headpieces, and vomit all over the yard, gasping for air. Such a hellish experience for everyone. So to recap, by the time this guy is caught, he has tortured, raped, and murdered at least 33 young men. The number could be higher. No one will ever know, as he likely committed the majority of these crimes by himself. Now, when it all fell apart, authorities found 26 decomposing bodies in the crawl space underneath his house. He claims the remaining 7 were thrown into the river. He was one sick psychopath who committed unimaginable acts of torture to his victims. Now, whether true or not, Gacy claims to have multiple personality disorder, with 4 personalities roaming around in his head. A contractor, a clown, a politician, and a corrupt police officer named Bad Jack. He claims Bad Jack was the killer. Apparently, he is a policeman who hates homosexuality. Okay, whatever, netso. Okay, trial time. John Wayne Gacy is, of course, found guilty on all counts, which is 33 counts of murder, 1 count of sexual assault, and 1 count of indecent liberties with a child. The sexual assault and indecent liberties charges were related to that final victim. The jury reached their verdict in less than 2 hours. It only takes them slightly longer to determine that he will receive the death penalty. His sentencing goes into effect in June 1977, and the execution date is set for June 2nd, 1980. This scumbag is finally executed on May 9, 1994. That's 14 years later than originally scheduled. Jeez. So he makes a final statement to his lawyer before he dies. Something about how killing him will not compensate for the loss of those he murdered, and that the state is murdering him. Okay. It is reported that his final spoken words were, "Kiss my ass." What a crybaby. For someone who acted so tough and brutalized so many boys, he sure acted like a wuss when he had to face the music. Such a coward and a loser. Idiot. Well, that's all for this episode of Serial Killers. If you enjoyed this video, please take a quick second to like it and subscribe to my channel, All Things True Crime. The subscribe button is right below the video. And if you ding the bell, you'll be alerted the next time I upload. I usually upload on Tuesdays. On the next episode of Serial Killers, we're going to learn all about Mikhail Popkov, also known as the Werewolf and the Angarsk Maniac, a prolific Russian serial killer and rapist who sexually assaulted and murdered around 80 women between 1992 and 2010 in Angarsk, Irkutsk in Siberia, and Vladivostok in the Far East. Catch all the details surrounding this serial killer here on All Things True Crime. It's truly chilling. Until next time, stay safe.